wait for Jana to finish cleaning her glasses.
And I need to
Thank you.
sneeze.
Bless you.
I'm leaving all of this in. I'm leaving it all. I'm leaving it all.
Well,
You're
then
not gonna...
lead us in, Troy.
Well,
Go for it.
welcome everyone to the Plot Geek Academy podcast, where we're real people, real working writers doing real things like sneezing and cleaning our glasses just before we start the
Oh, it's
session.
got to happen.
I'm Troy, and this is
CJ,
Oh,
you're
I'm
next.
sorry. This is Plot Geek. Sorry, I got
Who are you? Who are you? He always said we were Plot Geek. All right, let's try again. This is the Plot Geek Academy. He's Troy, she's CJ, and I'm Jana Brown. And we are seriously not this punchy. Wow. Oh my goodness. There's apparently been a lot of caffeine and sugar in our lives today. Hi, guys.
I'm CJ. It's nice to meet you. I'm really gonna sneeze again. Like, that's all I'm focused on, is that I'm going to sneeze again.
CJ might sneeze again, and that's okay. This is the third podcast in the series that we've been running, where we were talking about kind of who you are as an author, what it is that you want to write, how you set goals. And so in this one, we're kind of going to pull everything together and talk about how knowing what your goals are, knowing who you are and what you're willing to do, how does that translate into the things that you choose to write? So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And then next week, we will launch off into something brand new and spiffy. And since we don't know what that is yet, I won't sneak peek it anymore. Then it's going to be brand new and spiffy. So Troy, since we're talking about how does that translate into what you write, so you want to kind of bring us up to speed to say, if we know that a goal is, say, to make finances, then how do you align your writing with that goal? What would be kind of the top thing that you would suggest somebody do to try to put those things together?
So the first thing I'll say about aligning your goals is one thing that is often misunderstood by people who are just starting out writing, because I completely misunderstood it, is how much education it takes to actually be a professional writer and a novelist. And I'm not talking about college, and I'm not talking about business education even, and I'm not talking about even how to write, but I'm talking about things like aligning with the market and understanding the market and the publishing industry as a whole. And it's part of the writer education that's often so neglected. The average MFA program teaches you nothing about analyzing and understanding the publishing industry. But to be a writer with any kind of a career that is going to make you money, you have to understand the publishing industry. You have to understand what is happening in the publishing world around you. So you have to understand things like market trends, like what is happening in the market with, there's generally the top few genres are mystery, usually romance is top, then it's mystery, thriller, then sci-fi and fantasy. Sometimes mystery and thriller and sci-fi and fantasy switch places, but there's also subgenres within all of those genres, and different subgenres at different times are more popular than others, or certain tropes are more popular than others. And if you understand that, you can write a book that while you're writing it, you already know that it's going to sell. So we're not saying write to a trend or anything like that, but what we're saying is write to a market that you know people are reading in that market, so that you know you can sell books, but you're still writing the book that you want to write. So I think that initial research into what is actually happening in the market is super important to you being able to make money as an author. Now, CJ, why don't you talk to us about kind of still keeping your passion and writing what you'd like to write? Like, none of us that are in this particular call anyway want to just write things that we actually hate writing just so that we can make money. So how do you deal with that balance?
You know, when I first started out, like you've talked about before, many of us don't understand the market or its trends. And so I was just writing what I liked. And then what I realized was there is a way in which to write to a specific market, but also write what you enjoy. And quite frequently, you start with what you read. So what is it that you enjoy reading? Is it also something that translates into what you enjoy writing? Because if so, then you're the audience. So you know what that audience wants. I mean, that is the simplest form of market research you could possibly do, is sitting there and deciding, what do I like to read? And then going and reading more of that, but this time really paying attention to the content and what the content shows, and understanding what types of characters are being presented frequently, what types of things are expected. When you read reviews of other readers, what are they liking? What are they resonating with? Is it also what you resonate with? I have found that in order to write what I love, I have to go look for it, right? Because you will start a book, you will begin to read a book, and you'll go, I mean, I thought it was going to be this and it looked like it, but there are some elements here that I'm not a fan of. So where is that readership? And what do you love? And it's so funny that you asked me this, because for a while now, I have been missing the fluffy, whimsy romance books that I used to read, because I've been so focused on a lot of these more woke characters. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's certainly a market for it, right? There is a market for specific types of characters. And when I was taking a look at some Harlequin romances, and I went in, and they have it very neatly broken up as far as what the tropes are, what the expectations are within different types of romance series, different types of romance sub niches, and they really spell it out. If you ever go look at the submission pages, it's fascinating, because they've done that market research. And I went in and looked at every single thing that I liked. I identified it, and I was like, oh joy, there is fluffiness here, and I simply must go and read this book now, because I was like, I don't want to think about anything. I just want this to be unbelievably believable in a way that I escape to. I don't need the female to be massively strong-willed. I need her to be snarky, and then I need her to just wilt into the kiss, please. Because I love that so much. And so for me, that is what I love, and I love to write it. And it's really gratifying to know that there is a place somewhere in the market where that kind of romance and character and the fantasy and the journey of it is just so much fun. And so it is about what you love to read, and can you write it? Sometimes people find that what they love to read is not necessarily what they love to write, which is an interesting conundrum, but you're not going to know unless you're reading. I once had a client who wrote romance tell me he didn't read romance, or anything for that matter. And I asked him why. And he said, well, I don't want other people's ideas to influence me, which I think is valid to some extent. However, if you don't read what other people are reading, how can you then know what other people are wanting to read? There is a way to take timeless tropes, to take age-old wonderful plot devices, and make it your own. And I think that's what everyone's worried about. They're like, well, if I follow this evergreen trend, or if I follow something that, how do I make it my own? I want to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to have a good time with what you love to write. And so that's kind of where I've been lately, is just going back to the mind-numbing escapism that I enjoyed as a teen. Did that help, Troy, at all? Mind-numbing escapism there. What about you, Jana?
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, it's like, say, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, but you can definitely put a different chassis on top of it. You can add rims, you can do paint jobs, you can do all sorts of neat things where you still have that basic wheel that is what people love, and then you can put your own twist on it without having to go to, well, I'm going to make it square. Which Mythbusters did the whole square wheel thing once, and they did find out that the best thing for it is treating it like a Jeep and clawing your way up a hill, because the square would get stuck on things, so you actually got the torque to go up there. Worked great until they busted the axle. So they concluded that in general, there's a reason why we have round wheels and not square ones. And sometimes in our writing, we get the same thing. We're like, I'm going to do something new, and I'm going to build square wheels. And you'll find that for a certain audience or a certain subject, the square wheels kind of do some interesting things, right? But that in general, it's only good for those interesting things. And we have those niche audiences, and there's nothing wrong with writing to one, because we're talking about, how your goals translate. But again, that's a goal alignment, because if you write for a very niche audience, it generally doesn't take you very long for everybody in that audience to have read your book And now where do you go? Okay. So I think that one of the things that you can do is you can look at most of us, not everybody, I admit this, but most of us have a problem with idea ferriosis, where we have lots of ideas. The idea fairy is always there going, write this, write this, write this. So make that list and then use the education that Troy was talking about, the research, to say, is this something that would have legs as a money book, as something where there's a hot market and I'm probably going to make money with it? Does this have a really solid niche that really loves it? Some of the military sci-fi is like that. It's not a huge market, but the market that is there, holy crap, guys, they are rabid, especially if you get everything right. They will read you, they will follow you, they do all the things. Or is it something I just really want to write, and if I make a few pennies off of it here and there, and you can categorize that, and then you can prioritize it based on what your goals are. So if your goal is just get it out there and enjoy it, then maybe you prioritize something higher, versus if it's, I really want to catch this trend, this feeling, this market, and I want to make a lot of money off of it. And it's fine to do that. And then you can shift those around depending on where your life is, which we've talked about, depending on how things go, and sometimes where your muse is. I try not to be a slave to her too much because she's crazy. So it's knowing those things and knowing that sometimes you're going to choose something. So I wrote, one of my first books that I wrote is a science fiction Western romance. It is Firefly with more kissing. And I love this book, and I wrote it, and I have lots of people who love it, but it's one of those that it just kind of putters along and it makes me a few dollars every month, and it has never hit hard. But the other day it was at I work with a bookmobile service that they go to some of these events and they sell lots of different books. And so if I don't have a table at the event, I just let them carry some of my books. I pay for the privilege of them carrying some of my books. And a gal walked in and talked to the person who was running the shop, and she says, I really, really want romantic cowboys in space. And the gal who was running the shop went, I have just the book for you. It is the only book like this in the entire display, but it is your book. And I'm like, that's the person that I wrote that book for in the entire world besides me, because that girl wanted exactly what that was. So sometimes you get that funny match, but there's not a huge audience for that. And so I have to be content with saying that's not a money book, that's a passion book, and it's fun. And sometimes I get somebody who really wants romantic cowboys in space, and they love that book. But it's not, it's a different goal. And so writing the second one that goes with that, the priority shifts around based on what it is that I want to do. So that's what we're talking about, is the education means you can set your priorities so that you can produce the things that are going to help you get to your goals. So let's see. So we've talked about education. We've talked a little bit about, so Troy, if we're not reinventing the wheel, and we talked about, making it unique, but not too unique, how would you suggest people bring that uniqueness? How do you know when you've gone too far and now you're making the wheel square instead of the wheel still being round, but you've just, added some bling to it?
Oh man, so sometimes you're just going to make some oblong wheels because you're going to make mistakes, or you're going to make, so they're not quite square, but they're not quite round either, and it's just something that's kind of like your cowboy romance. Like, I think that's hilarious, right? Um, and I sell in person. I sell lots of books of Call of Karen, because I can say, if you read the first page of the prologue, you'll understand what it's all about. And Call of Karen is a book I wrote on a dare. It's about internet Karen and Cthulhu meeting and falling in love, and they go on adventures together and talk to lots of managers and all that kind of stuff. And it's really a fun book, right? But it's a fun book and it's a funny book, but like, how do you categorize that on to sell it to people? Lovecraftian romance, horror, humor. That's not really a big category, right? It's not really, but people in person see the cover, they're like, Cthulhu, and what the in the world is happening there? And I'm like, read the first page of the prologue. They get about halfway through the first page of the prologue and they're like, sold. That's a one that, like Bookmobile you're talking about. Like, I just got PayPal over the weekend that was like, oh, I sold some more Call of Karen. And that's just the way that and there's a sequel to that, and people read that too because they think Karen and Cthulhu as a couple is hilarious, right? But on Amazon or in other retailers, like, it's a little more difficult to sell that because there's no category for that. Like, it doesn't fit in a category. But I wrote it on a dare. I really didn't care what happened to it, so I'm happy that it sells at conventions and stuff like that. So it's definitely a different goal, but it is definitely an oblong wheel. Like, it does not fit into the wheelhouse. It isn't that type of a book. Um, but the way you bring uniqueness really is through your characters. Like, Hamlet has been rewritten dozens and dozens of times in tons of different ways. Lion King is Hamlet. I mean, it is. It is the same story. It is the same tropes. It is the same thing, except that it's with cute lions, right? Instead, right? So it works. So it's by bringing in your characters and bringing in unique characters that come in with unique experiences into any situation. And I always tell people, the idea is, if I sit you down in a room and I have 8 of you as authors and I give you a single writing prompt and I give you an hour to write something, you're going to come out with 8 different stories, because not one of you is going to approach it in exactly the same way. Not one of you is going to approach your characters in the exact same way. Everybody is going to come out with a different story from the exact same writing prompt, sometimes in completely different genres, regardless of whether that's a romantic prompt in my mind or not. Somebody's going to come up with something that is not a romance that follows that prompt, right? That's just the way that it works. So through your characters and through developing your own author voice is the way that you're going to do that. This means that if you love Stephen King, you're still not going to write in Stephen King's voice. If you love Dean Koontz, you're not going to write in Dean Koontz's voice, because you don't have their voice. You don't have their life and you don't have their experiences. And they, on the counterpart, do not have yours. So you've got unique things to add to your book by adding yourself into your work. And this is where the thing of writing stuff that you don't love, or writing stuff with AI, or all those different things comes in, is you're losing that human connection of you and who you are, which is what really makes your books unique. There was a recent study, a quick little tangent, recently that showed that overall, someone who was not creative when they were given a variety of prompts from AI, that person was more creative. But when they looked at the overall results of the non-creative people trying to produce creative work using AI, the overall creativity was reduced. More of those stories were closer to each other than they were further apart, because people were not bringing their unique voice to that prompt. They were just following a prompt that was given them by AI under certain circumstances. So while their creativity was enhanced, the overall creativity and quality of the products that were produced was lower, right? It's kind of just the way things work. You need to bring yourself and your unique voice and who you are as a person and the characters that you love to create and that you love to read. You bring those into the mix, and that's what makes your story different than someone else's. And not because it's a different plot or a different formula or different tropes even, but because it's your story, uniquely yours. So, CJ, what do you think of that?
I think that when it comes to writing and people being worried about reinventing the wheel or changing things, or how can I write something that's compelling and unique and different, my favorite example, and you know this, Troy, and I think I've shared this with you, Jana, is Studio C's skit, Lord of the Potter, where they compare Lord of the Rings to Harry Potter. It's hilarious. And they are able to identify character archetypes. They're able to identify tropes and storylines that are also similar to both of these series. And what's hilarious about this is that so many people, when they watch it, they have this brilliant aha moment where they're, because people, you know, who know about Lord of the Rings have most likely watched Harry Potter or read Harry Potter too, but they never really put it together of how incredibly close those storylines really are when it comes to what kind of journey it is, when it comes to the types of characters involved, when it comes to the types of, you know, secondary characters and conflicts, and the way in which things are presented. And those stories were told, you know, so far apart, such different authors, and yet it's the same types of, you know, really cherished ideas, I guess you could say, that we all love and that we use. And so if you have never seen that, go look up Studio C, Lord of the Potter. Please watch that. It's hilarious. It's not too long. I think like 5 minutes or so. but it's going to be enlightening and really illustrate this point that we're trying to make. And then when it comes to putting yourself in there, I can say with 100% certainty that every character, every female protagonist I write is me in some way. And many times it is me working through things, because internal conflict is what's driving that story, right? And so there are so many little issues and things that I am reflecting on and thinking about, things, weaknesses that I struggle with, that I give my characters, because I'm hoping on some level that they are going to figure it out, and much better than I did. Or maybe I'm going to have an aha moment. Maybe if my characters can figure these things out in life that I didn't, I will somehow learn from my characters, even though it's all coming here. So it's therapy in a lot of ways, but it's you. And it's important that you put you in that, and you rely on those past experiences, and that you explore it fully, because that also is what, as Troy said, makes it very unique to you. So yeah, that's definitely been my experience with all of these and how I'm able to do that. But please go watch Studio C. It's so funny. And the quickest way for you to realize this, like, it illustrates it beautifully. So
Well, and on that note, improv in general, if you really want to stretch your chops as a writer, doing a few things that have to do with acting, with improv, with things like that, that is a really, really great way to figure out what your voice is, to figure out what are the things that when you're given a prompt and told, okay, you have to go on this, what do you think of? That's going to tell you a whole lot about the way that your brain functions and what is unique about your voice. And it's what we talk about with practicing a lot. Writing a lot is the other way that you really develop your unique author voice. And there's a story about pottery classes and how they set up and said half of the class is going to try to make one perfect pot and is going to spend the whole semester at it and get a grade that way. The other half is going to make as many pots as they can, and then they're going to be judged on the volume that they push through. And what they learned over the course of this class is those who had made all of those pots over and over and over again, by the end, they were making better pots than the one pot that had been worked on all through the semester, because they had the time to make mistakes and to fail and to try different things and to go, well, what happens if we add this clay? Well, that sucked. What happens if we fire it this way? Well, that worked really well. And with writing, we do that most of the time, because some people say, well, I've been working on this for 10 years and I love them. And at the same time, I want to say, well, please work on something else, because when you've worked it and reworked and reworked and reworked it, it loses some of its love. It loses that form. But when you're able to say, I work on a thing, I finish a thing, I send it out, and I learn from it, and then I apply that to the next thing, well, comparatively, you're getting better every time, and you have all this work that's out there, hopefully making you money, even if it's just pennies per month or whatever. It's still out there doing its job. So that's another way to develop your unique voice, is to keep trying and to keep experimenting. And I know you two, so I'm going to shoot it at both of you. I know that right now you're in the middle of an experiment where you are writing together. What do you think that does as far as unique author voice, and how that affects what you're writing and the goals that you have for that piece? And either one of you
Ooh,
can jump in on that.
man. Well, first I will start by saying I love how you made the comparison to theater, because one thing, so CJ and I have both done theater in the past, and one thing you can tell about your voice when you do theater is what roles that you actually get and that you actually enjoy. I was Aslan one fall, and then I was Richard in Lion and Winter in the spring. And you think those are two very different roles, right? But actually, the characters in many ways are very similar. And when I tell people those two roles, they go, "Oh, if they know me, they go, I could see you in both those roles," right? Because of anyway. So that's one way of developing and understanding your own voice, is to play different roles and see what happens. Because as different as those roles are, they're both me, right? And same thing in a lot of my fiction and stuff like that. But I think when you're working with another author, first of all, um, and this is one of the challenges of collaboration, is you need to have some kind of a similarity in your voice, right? But in our particular case, we're writing two different characters which each have their unique voice, but at the same time, we're blending our voices for some third characters that have come into the story. And that's been really fun because I'll see a slightly different take on that person than CJ will. And we'll have this minor character that's really extremely well developed because we have two voices that are harmonizing, similar to singing. And so in writing, there's really, I mean, and there have been a few moments in the writing of this when this has happened, when there's a singer will tell you there's nothing better than that moment when you're harmonizing with someone. And all of a sudden those harmonies just come together, and it's just this beautiful thing that is so different than what you would have created on your own. But it is just absolutely amazing for both people that do it when you do that in singing. I don't know very much about that because I'm not a singer person. But anyway, but um, but I know that in writing, when I feel both those voices coming together, and now this book is taking a new direction, and now this third character really has a real personality, and now these things are really coming together and working, it's that harmonizing of your two very different writing styles and writing voices, but into one that actually works. And for me, that's a very magical experience, and it's been happening a lot with our writing of this particular book. But neither one of us is giving up our writer voice for the other. Now, I had a collaboration that I did with another author that just did not work. And the reason it didn't work is our voices never found harmony. They never found harmony, and we just couldn't, no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't make it work because they were too different. Right? They were two different styles, two completely different thought processes about how the writing process worked, everything. And it just never worked. It never worked out. So understand that maintaining your author voice and the integrity of that, even if you're in a collaboration, if it's not working, stop the collaboration, because it's not worth it to compromise your own author voice that you've developed. Now, I mean, to be fair, you also have to develop an author voice for that to be a valid thing. So when you're first starting out, don't just abandon things because it's hard. Struggles are going to happen at first, but understand if you're learning and growing, that's good. If you're just fighting all the time, that's not good. That's a bad thing.
I think when you were talking about theater and how those roles are similar, I was thinking about that very thing. And I was like, oh, no, he's right. Because I played a few roles, but two of them that were very similar was Corey in Barefoot in the Park and Zanita from Music Man. And you wouldn't think that they were similar, but they're just quirky, feisty people, right? Just quirky and feisty, and just kind of dance to the beat of their own drum. And in many ways, that is Harper. That is the person that I'm writing now, with a little bit of that in there. And so I think that the parts of you that you bring in influence that. The voice that you have, the style that you have, can sometimes adjust and mix, and that doesn't always happen. You know, if your writing styles are too different, then sometimes you can't adjust. Sometimes collaboration is compromise, and so you find a way to meld. And I think that Troy and I have writing styles that are just so similar enough, and we have a writing process that is so similar that it just works, because we're a bit of a mix between discovery and plotting, and we're able to adjust. If something is set, it's not really set. If we see a problem, we can change it and immediately move forward. Whereas other people who really need to stick with that exact plot, and if we don't have that exact plot, we may freak out and need several Xanax by the end of the week. That would be a harder thing for me to work with. I'm sure that would be a harder thing for Troy to work with, simply because it's not a similar enough process. You learn these things. So for me, this has been a great experience. I would not have known that, though, again, because I had not ever done a collaboration like this before. So it is very much about that process of trying and writing and doing and saying yes to the things that you can say yes to, even if you are afraid to say yes to them. Because I was afraid to say yes to this because it involved a pre-order, the horror. So, but we said yes anyway.
And everyone will be able to see the results of that horror in January 2025. Is that right?
January 2025. Yes, absolutely.
So.
And what's beautiful is that has been a great motivator for me. So I'm looking at another one of my books, and I'm considering putting it up on pre-order to force myself into finishing because I've been messing around with it for so long, and I'm like, I need to not mess around with it. I need to finish it and get it out there into the world. And so I'm considering putting up a pre-order just because of the kind of, it's gentle pressure, but it's pressure, right? But in collaborative writing, the beauty of it is, like, I think we'll continue writing together, because what we've done is we've created a third voice by writing together, and it's a good one, and it's one that I like and that I enjoy, and I really enjoy the process. So I think that we'll probably continue writing together, even though we'll both do our own projects, simply because we found something that works, that we enjoy, that's fun. And I mean, maybe this will turn into a series. Maybe, I mean, I've got all kinds of thought processes in the back of my head, but really, what has happened is we developed a new and unique voice. So anyway, it's a super fun thing to find, and you find it in almost any kind of collaboration. Um, from time to time, is that your writer voice, you actually develop something new, and something exciting, and that's just been really fun for both of us.
All right. And we will loop back and we'll do probably an entire podcast on collaboration and some of the different ways that you can do it, some of the pros, cons, pitfalls, scary stories, all those kinds of things. And we'll talk about writer motivation, because Troy brought up some really good, ways that you can motivate yourself, finding out if you're internally or externally motivated. We'll get to all of that. But I'm going to bring us back to, part of why I wanted to talk about the collaboration is, again, that connects to the how your goals get to what you write. Because if your goal, again, is to get books out, sometimes having somebody to help nudge you along, that's going to be a really good way to do it. So we're talking about ways you can experiment with your process, with who you write with the genres that you write, that kind of thing. Sometimes you need to experiment with those in order to find the sweet spot that then attaches to your goals. If you say the subgenre I'm writing in is very niche and it's not bringing me financial success, then maybe if you really want that, you're going to have to experiment with your first romance book, or you're going to have to try something else that is then going to attach to that. And so that's our example of other things you can try, but it still comes back down to what their goals are. So they want to get a book out together that's a potential financial success, because you guys are putting, it's mystery romance, right? Thriller romance? I'm getting it wrong. Somebody help me. What is it?
Romantic suspense / thriller.
There we go.
We should probably know that, Troy.
But that's a solid genre.
Yeah.
That's a solid genre for you guys to be writing in, as far as a genre where there's a lot of financial movement.
Mhm.
So that's doing that translation that says, here are the goals we want from this, and so this is how it's affecting what we've chosen to write. So we do want to encourage you to experiment with things, but finish stuff. Do not flitter around from experiment to experiment to experiment to experiment and not complete the work. Some things you're going to hit and you're going to go, yeah, this is not my thing. Holy moly, not my thing. That's fine. It's fine to hit something and go, this is really not it. But there's other things that you have to start to learn for yourself. What's the difference between a hard part that you just need to push through, like a mushy middle, and when it really and truly is not something that works with the way that you write and what it is that you like. So that's, again, another podcast, but just, as you look at experimentation, don't flitter too much, but at the same time, be willing to try new things. So I think in the last 3 podcasts, we have covered a lot of really, really good things. We have talked about, CJ, do you want to recap for us what we've talked about in the last 3 podcasts at a very high level?
Sure. So we've talked about understanding yourself. We've talked about setting goals. We've talked about aligning with the market demands. We've talked about how to figure all of this out. What are you doing as an author to figure out what you want to write, how you want to write, how you want to craft your author career, because that's what this all leads to. We would like for you to have a direction and a goal and a purpose, and not flail about 10 years down the road, finally sitting there going, oh, I think I know now. We would like you to be able to hit the ground running in an organized, chaotic, yet chaotic organized sort of way. I don't know if that sounds appealing in any way, shape, or form, but we're trying to help you figure that out. So we want you to be adaptable. We want you to be passionate. We want you to be successful in whatever way you think that looks for you, whether it's making money, whether it's learning and improving as an artist, as an author, writing craft, hobby, whatever that goal is, figure those things out for yourself, because learning about you is really how you're going to figure out your author career moving forward. So just remember that we are here to help you with craft, with creating, with career. And that's why we wanted to discuss these things early on, so that you will have a nice framework or a nice mental awareness of where you need to begin and the way in which you should look at that author career, and if it should even be one. Maybe it should be a hobby and something you just super enjoy on the weekends. That is okay too, guys. Okay, whatever it is you want to do. Anything else, Jana, Troy? Did I leave anything out?
Well, I'm being attacked by 2 adorable kittens because they apparently they woke up and they noticed that the door was open just a crack, and that was enough of a crack for them to come through. One of them is licking my ring light. I'm sure that that's not going to lead into anything bad. So there's a new story for you, because that is the way that life works. And that's the last thing that I'm going to say on all of this. One of the best things that I think you can do for your writing career is to be interested in a lot of things and to try a lot of things. It helps to, owning kittens tells me all sorts of interesting things about stuff that I could write about having kittens, or about alien kittens, or about do not claw my leg. All those kinds of happy things. And it always amuses me. I'm a big Jeopardy fan. I like to watch Jeopardy. The number of writers and editors who are excellent Jeopardy players is very, very high, because good writers and good editors are always out there learning. They take experiences and say, there's a cake decorating class happening. I've never done cake decorating. I could learn something about cake decorating, and maybe one day I'm going to write a character who is a cake decorator. So you go and you take the class and you learn about cake decorating or underwater basket weaving or whatever. Take advantage, and especially with the internet has opened things up so much. Take advantage of all the things that you can learn, because there are very few experiences that you cannot translate to your writing somewhere. And as CJ brought up, that is part of what makes your writing unique, because you bring that part of you that's with it, and you bring your esoteric knowledge of underwater basket weaving or whatever it is that you've learned. So I would just really encourage you to, as part of being a good writer, get out from yourself, learn a lot of things, and then bring it home to apply it to your writing. All right, guys, any final words from everybody else?
I think we pretty much covered it.
All right. Well, then with that, we are the Plot Geek Academy, and we will be back next week with the start of a brand new series of podcasts featuring something else having to do with writing and publishing, but we don't know what that is, so you better come tune in so you can find out. We'll catch you next time. Bye-bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.